Setting a specific date for the end of the world is a cultural taboo, usually associated with fringe movements. Yet, a specific group of researchers is making a strictly mathematical case for one. They point to the year 2030. This date is derived from a rigid equation found within ancient texts, rather than modern headlines. The variables for this formula are pulled from disparate sources: the Genesis creation account, the parables of Jesus, and the ancient Jewish Talmud. Solving the equation requires reading these records as a timeline of events, rather than a standard historical narrative. When the focus shifts to the chronology hidden in the text, these prophecies align into a solvable formula. The first rule of this calculation appears in Psalm 90 and the book of 2 Peter. In prophetic terms, a single day equals 1,000 years. Applying that rule to the 7 days of Genesis reveals a much larger timeline. The first 6 days represent 6,000 years of human history, a period defined by labor. The 7th day stands alone, representing a final 1,000-year period of rest. This schedule suggests the current era of history concludes exactly at the 6,000-year mark. To find when those 6,000 years end, we need an anchor date. We need to identify the year 4000, the end of day 4, which the texts associate with the death of the Messiah. We can verify this year by looking at the official records of the ancient Jewish priesthood preserved in the Talmud. The Talmud records anomalies starting exactly 40 years before the temple's destruction. First, a ceremonial crimson thread stopped turning white. Then, massive temple doors swung open nightly. Finally, the main lamp on the temple menorah began extinguishing itself every night, despite the priest's interventions. Ancient history records the exact year the Romans destroyed the Second Temple, 70 CE. Subtracting the 40 years of Talmudic anomalies from that destruction date places the starting point of these events in the year 30 CE. Now we can ask the final question: how much time passes between that 30 CE anchor and the end of the 6,000-year cycle? A specific 2-day interval appears repeatedly across unrelated biblical stories. The Good Samaritan pays an innkeeper 2 days' wages, promising he will return after his journey. Jesus stays across the Jordan River for exactly 2 days before returning to Judea to resurrect Lazarus. And the prophet Hosea specifies that God's people will be revived after 2 days, then raised up on the 3rd. Using our day for 1,000-year rule, those 2 days convert into 2,000 years. When we add that span to our 30 CE anchor date, the math leads to the year 2030. This chronological framework identifies 2030 as a moment of global transition. It marks the start of the final 1,000-year period, a Sabbath era where conflict ends and the Messiah rules. There are other interpretations. Amillennialism, for instance, treats these specific numbers as spiritual metaphors rather than literal years. However, dozens of different authors, parables, and external historical records align on these specific figures. Whether viewed as predictive prophecy or ancient literary design, the math within these texts identifies 2030 as the year the 6,000-year cycle concludes.